Well, hello, students. I'm going into phase two of Monday's lecture, the week of the 27th. And what I am going to talk about here, okay, and continuing on with your books, is taking you to figure 13-3, and that is going to be Lewin's force field model of change. Kurt Lewin was a psychologist who came up with um, a, something that I think is very significant, and it's called the force field model of change. And he said there, and his belief was that there are certain things out there that do promote change, and there are also variables on the other side of the coin which prevent change from happening. So your book identifies, I'm on page 472, it identifies Lewin's belief that in order to implement any type of change, we need to identify with the existing forces that are ultimately driving that change. Anything in the external environment, as I mentioned earlier, will drive change. Competition that maybe has your number, that can make things more effectively, more efficiently, and cheaper. Customers shift their demands from what they used to want, and now they want something different. Government intervention, new laws, new regulations, which put a strain on the company to produce products. And the other thing is the culture of the company. If the culture of the company is being strained by different types of influences, a new leader may get resistance from people are that are not wanting to change the way things used to be in the company. They might want to implement new types of computer learning, new information systems, and so forth. And people don't want to come out of their comfort zone because they feel that they're not going to be able to really keep their jobs if they don't keep up with the changes that are being demanded. So here again, more pressure. Leaders that are more autocratic than democratic, more that dictate rather than facilitate. Company has to cut back because there's financial constraints. They're not making the profits they thought they were going to, and they have to cut back on maybe employees, lay people off. Here again, we have more change. So there's financial constraints as well. However, most of things that drive change are either psychologically or culturally based. A lot of people fear coming out of their comfort zones, period. They don't like any type of change because it means something negative to them. A new supervisor comes in, everybody goes around the water cooler. What's this person like? Am I going to fail? I don't know if I can handle the job. And that can include dissatisfaction with the status quo. So, the way your book states it, if you look again at 13.3, you have forces driving change and forces that restrain change. So, drivers of change, usually these new leaders or existing leaders, are going to get a lot of pushback from the status quo. So when the need to change is more powerful than what is saying let's not change, the norms of the group, we talked about that, the culture, then things will likely change because they need to for survival. Now look at on page 473, Lewin's force field model of change. He has three things. Unfreezing, that means that what we're currently doing needs to be changed. And that means that what we got to do is stop doing things the way, or at least introduce the concept of stop doing things the way we used to do them or are presently doing. That is unfreezing. And if you have several, we talked about this in your lost threads, but when you have several generations under one roof at a company that's been around for a long time, you're going to get a lot of pushback because, especially the baby boomers, they don't like change. The millennials will accept it, but they want to be appreciated for being part of it. There's a lot of contradiction for implementing change until you know what the change is. So now you get a bunch of people in a group together and you say, okay, guess what? We got to change things, and this is why. So when you look at Lewin's model of change on 13.4, it's a three-step model for a reason. You introduce change, but it needs to be introduced transparently. It needs, depending on what that change is, it needs to be introduced so that there is clarity in the change and that it is a benefit not only for the company, but also for the employees as well. It's going to be a balance there. Sometimes you got to do a lot of changes right away. Just think like right now with this pandemic, right? People going to restaurants on a regular basis. And now they're told they can't go, they can only take out. What type of a strain does that put on the restaurant? I mean, think of all the money they might have invested for nice ambiance in the restaurant, sit down, order, enjoy each other's company. That's gone. It's like I can only go and take things out once I order. And then again, I'm wearing a mask and gloves. And very carefully talking to the person giving me the food through a glass window. But companies need to adapt because it's necessary. But I'm not saying all things are life and death in organizations. But when change needs to happen, once that is recognized, then you can slowly, if you have time, like especially plan change, you're not reacting to change, okay? If you've got time, then you can implement the change slowly. So once employees see that it works, they can jump on board and be a part of the change. And then once the change is implemented, you refreeze. So basically, you can look at page 473 and read about it, but I wanted to kind of give you a little pictorial about it. Once the change is implemented, you need to get feedback. And getting feedback is essentially important. Now, your book states on 473 that some observers added a fourth step to Lewin's change process. And the fourth step involves diagnosing the barriers to change. So you go through each department, and we talked about this in previous classes, okay? You go from the strategic, the tactical, to the operational. And you try to find out how the change is affecting each one at their level. Of course, the planners at the top, right? They knew the change had to happen. They got to drive it forward. The leaders at the top have to drive the change forward. But there has to be a transparency between those and the worker bee groups, those in middle management that have to bring that change to the day-to-day operations. So how do we convince everyone that this change is necessary? So that's why they created this fourth step. It involves diagnosing the barriers to change and the individual, both from the group norm to the individual level. Now I want to bring you to figure 13-5, and that is going to be Carter's strategic change. Now we're going to go from Lewin to Carter. And when you look at 13-5, Lewin was concerned with the psychological and cultural aspects of change. Carter describes change efforts that are managed by leaders. So Carter had 8 steps to strategically change a company. It was a checklist for planning, communicating, and implementing change. So Carter's model looks at 8 steps, and you can see in affecting, 8 steps in affecting the strategic change model. So step 1, establish a sense of urgency. Step 2, develop a guiding coalition. Step 3, create a vision. That's an important one because creating a vision tells everyone in the organization from how you see things, how you see implementing change as a leader. You step forward, communicate that vision to everyone in something that is succinct, sequential, and understandable. Put everyone on the same page. Make sure everyone understands it. Get feedback on the change and repeat it often if you have to. And then step 5, try to take the doubts away. Remove some of those barriers of change. Reinforce the reason why change is so possible and why it's so necessary. Step 6, set small, reasonable goals, achievable wins. Step 7, make sure that there's an ongoing conscious awareness. It's a learning process of the change. It isn't meant to be punitive. That's important. Don't make change punitive. Make it so that when individuals buy in, they understand why the change is necessary, and make it a continuous learning process. And step 8, now you can integrate that change. It goes from something that's progressive to something that is integrated and it's transparent along the way. So I want you to look at page 474. It talks about Carter's steps to strategic change, and it goes through each one of them in detail. Okay, so give me a second here. Okay. I'm looking at several different screens as I'm giving you this lecture, and I want to make sure that we are all where we're supposed to be. Okay. And so we leave off on 474. I think I'm going to end right now with this particular section. And when we come back, I'm going to get into figure 13-6 on page, that's figure 13-6 on page 474. Okay, reflect on, we just talked about a lot. Reflect on Carter and Lewin, and what I just said for a little while, maybe about 10, 15 minutes or so. I'll be back shortly.